Grab coffee throughout the presentation this morning. First of all, my name is Pat Moulton-Howden. I am the Director of Workforce Development for the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. I am also plan to take over as Executive Director when Jeff decides to move on to his 4th retirement and 12th career, Jeff Lewis. So it's a pleasure to be here this morning in Wilmington, and first of all, thank you all very much for being here today. It's really important that we hear from you as we work on our comprehensive economic development strategy for Southeast Vermont. So thank you for taking time from what I know is a busy day to be here. What would be great is if we could just really quickly just run around the room, introduce ourselves. Who are you? If you're with an organization, what organization? You don't have to be with an organization. You just be here by yourself, which is a good thing. So again, Pat Moulton-Howden, Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. Start with you, Bill.
I'm Bill Colvin. I'm the Community Development Specialist for the Bennington County Regional Commission.
Royal Wilson. I'm with a nonprofit called the Mountaineer Inn.
We hope to turn that around.
Right, that's why I'm here.
Ken Black.
Meg Streeter Real Estate.
Carolyn Palmer, Wilmington Village Association, and I have a shop here in town.
Adam Levine, Valley View Saloon.
Lenny Chapman, Chapman's Antiques.
Jake White, Wilmington Select Board.
Mike Eldred, Deerfield Valley News.
Gretchen Haverleff, the Town of Wilmington's Economic Development Specialist.
I think you all know Laura Sibilia, who is also with us at BDCC, and Jeff Lewis, Executive Director of Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation, and we'll introduce Frank in a minute. But again, thank you for being here. I'm going to do a quick just overview of the Southeast Vermont Economic Development Strategy, kind of where we've been and where we are now, and then Frank's going to launch into our comprehensive economic development strategy. SeVEDS, Southeast Vermont Economic Development Strategy. I think how many people have heard that before and have some familiarity? Okay, great. It is a process we've been through over the last several years to really try to define what's happening in the Windham County economy, what's going on, and if it's good news, great. If it's bad news, what are we going to do to move forward? Well, short story is it wasn't good news in terms of wage stagnation and population loss, and yes, some new business startups, but not necessarily adding to wage levels, meaning there's a lot of businesses that are starting but maybe not making a lot of money, or they might be lifestyle type businesses. So we basically saw that status quo long-term isn't going to work for Windham County. So we've got to figure out how are we going to reverse that trend. And that's what the Southeast Vermont Economic Development Strategy and the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy is all about, which is how do we reverse the economic decline here in this region. And as Frank has said before, I'm going to steal his line, we didn't get here overnight, we're not going to get somewhere else overnight, but we have to start somewhere, and where we are is the start, the beginning, and the process you're here today is part of that process. So SeVEDS is an organization. Laura is Executive Director. It has a mission statement. And it has a shared sense of urgency, which is really critical when you're doing this kind of economic development planning. We all need to feel it. We all need to make sure nonprofit inns become for-profit inns. We need that sense of urgency to turn things around. We recognize that low wages and a rising cost of living and limited job opportunities, create a disconnect between the skills needed by employers and the skills held by the workforce. Workforce being a big issue that we have heard over and over and over again from employers, which is part of why I'm here in doing the workforce work, is to try to see if we can match those skills, because that's part of what leads to the low wages. Also, this leads to a widely shared sense of economic insecurity, resulting in many Vermonters looking for economic opportunities somewhere else, and few choosing Vermont as a place to live and conduct business. Another trend we've got to reverse. How do we keep our young people? How do we attract them back? How do we help create an entrepreneurial ecosystem, innovation ecosystem here in the region so we're growing more new businesses, creating better jobs? And lastly, our vision, SeVEDS, Southeast Vermont, will have an economy that generates long-term growth and prosperity, and that improves our quality of life and sustains our quality of place. That's our mission, that's our vision, that's where we're headed. That's what SeDS is all about, which Frank will get into in a little more detail. Am I missing another slide here? Oh, yes. We've got our vision. Lastly, with any good process, start with a mission, vision, and then have specific defined goals. And these are our objectives to get us to by 2017. You can see them here. Improve wage parity with the surrounding labor shed being where do we pull from for our workforce in our region. You can read those. These are all this information, by the way, is on our SeVEDS website if you wish to check back with it. So we've got a mission, vision, goals, and then measures, specific measurable outcomes that we expect to achieve. I'm not going to go through these all, but for example, increase the average wage, increase the labor participation rate, increase median annual income for bachelor's degree workforce. Interesting data Frank's going to talk about disparity with folks with higher degrees and wages in our region. So we've got a good start. We've got vision, mission, goals, spilt coffee, and measures. Every good meeting has to have at least one spilt coffee. So I encourage you, and you're not alone, Wendy. I encourage you to check the SeVEDS website, dive into this in a little more detail, and with that, any questions about where we are so far with SeVEDS and what it's all about? You'll have a better picture at the end of this discussion, but we really hope we're going to be picking your brains and hearing a lot from you today, but any questions thus far? Great. Well, feel free to pipe in with questions at any time. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Frank Knott. Frank is with Vital Economy, who is the consultant that's been working with us on SeVEDS thus far and is working to help us create a comprehensive economic development strategy. Frank has just boatloads of knowledge and experience and has been working in communities and regions throughout the country and can bring all that together to help us. So please help me welcome Frank Knott. Thank you, Frank.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I know it's early and we haven't spilled enough cups of coffee yet. But what we're, as Pat said, we encourage interaction. So this is not supposed to be sage on the stage, you know, pushing information out alone. We're looking for you to ask questions. We have different points in this presentation to ask for your input, but that doesn't mean that's the only chance for you to give an input. If you don't understand something, make sure that you ask the question. The clock is there, and I have Jeff, Laura, and Pat that will be managing my time because we have to be in Brattleboro by 12:30, is it? Or something like that? So for another meeting. So we're going to really move this along. And just to go over the agenda with you, the first thing we're going to talk about after the overview is what we call Community Economics 101. How does an economy really work in the 21st century, whether it be rural or urban? We're then going to focus in on, the next one will be a regional profile, helping you understand basic statistics and data that will help you understand what the trends have been over time. And if you feel like you've got this nonprofit in, there might be some reasons in this data that is getting you there and not enabling you to move further into the for-profit mode. And speaking of for-profit, just so you understand, Vital Economy is a consulting firm by accident. We are successful entrepreneurs who came together in 1992 to bring best business practices to economic development in rural America. So our focus across the United States and Canada has been on really working with rural communities just like yours. And so even though I hail from a city called Baltimore, which is not a rural community, we have been spending the last almost 21 years now working exclusively in rural communities all across the U.S. and Canada. So I can assure you that you are not alone in your struggles, and you also have the opportunity to be successful like other communities have figured out how to be and maintain the unique character of rural communities, and that's what we're going to try to focus on today. Once we get through the regional profile, we will then go to break, and then we're going to explore some issues of challenge and opportunity and look for input from you all and some verification of the ones that have already been provided to us. And then we're going to talk about quality of place and the role quality of place plays in an effective economic strategy. And in rural communities, quality of place is very, very critical. It's an incredible asset you have, which many urban areas don't have. A little statistic I will give you is that throughout the United States and in Canada as well, over the last 20 years there's been a major change in where people move to. In the 50s, after my dad and others came home from the war, and the Eisenhower administration built the great highways, suburbia exploded across this country. In the last 20 years, the major growth has been either from suburbia to rural active lifestyle, or from suburbia to urban active lifestyle. Suburbia is not winning anymore, it's those two different lifestyles. And what you need to figure out is how you play in that movement and how those demographics can play to your strengths and how your strengths can play to those demographics. And if you're in a place like this that is in close proximity to urban areas, but is removed enough to be a unique rural, bucolic location that people can enjoy, you try to figure out how do you leverage both of those together to get the maximum impact. So what we will, and then at the end what we're going to do is talk about what the next steps are from here as we go forward. Okay, now, the first thing I want to talk about is what we have in the center here. We are operating with different projectors in every meeting, and every meeting the colors are different. So, believe it or not, the right side there of that circle is supposed to be red, below is supposed to be green where quality place is, and to the left is economic resilience. Okay, so you guys can see from here, okay? This is what it's supposed to look like, okay? So the purpose of this slide is to first of all introduce you to this concept that in order for an economy to move effectively, it has to be balanced. And most economic strategies traditionally have not been balanced. They've principally been based upon economic resilience, focused on hard infrastructure, focused on finance. This is one of the reasons why in rural communities like this you have this struggle between what people perceive economic to be, which is about raiding the land and doing untoward things to the atmosphere, versus environmental interests who perceive that their way is the only way. So you have, in the balanced approach, you're looking at the role of quality of place in equal balance with a focus on building the human capacity of the region to have the appropriate workforce for the work that is a high priority here, and with economic growth. And our belief historically has been at Vital Economy, you can have all three of those and you can have them in balance. They don't have to be in conflict with one another. And the way you make sure you do that, on the left side you'll see this industry sector list. Don't worry about reading it. You'll see things from technology-driven precision manufacturing, healthcare, and you've got logistics and distribution, hospitality. The hospitality's in there, retail and tourism. And high quality education is in here. All of these service sectors need to be looked at in terms of what their niches are that inform that balanced approach. And then that balanced approach looks at what the 5-year goals are and how do you create action plans that achieve those goals but keep your community in balance, okay? So we're looking at balance, we're looking at a strategy that has measurement to it and specific metrics and priorities are decided upon. The second piece I want to just give you a heads up on has to do with this idea of value chain. And what you're seeing here is the P to C is what we call a value chain. Anybody ever heard of a value chain? A few of you, okay. The value chain in any sector is, whether it be if you're in the oil business or whether you're in the hospitality business, you have where is the original raw material of that sector and where is the consumer. And in between, if you grow corn and this person over here sells cereal in a box, there are a whole bunch of steps in between. And each of those steps has a cost related to it. So you grow the corn, you harvest the corn, you truck the corn to some processor, the processor processes it, it sends it to a company that makes it into something, the company makes it into something, packages it, gives it to a distributor that sends it to a wholesaler sends it to a retailer, and the retailer sells it to a consumer. At every step of the way there are costs. In every value chain, in every sector, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, whether it's oil, whether it's selling margarine, the 2/3 of all the profit in that value chain is in the last 1/3 closest to consumer. In most rural communities, many of their businesses are in the first 2/3. Okay, and as a result, they end up having commodity jobs because they're producing commodity materials. So at Vital Economy, one of our jobs is to try to figure out how do we help you create a value-added, what is called a value-added approach to the sector you're in, so your business can get closer to C. Okay? And the example I will give you, that I didn't give yesterday, is if I take you to, how many of you know where Tasmania, Australia is? Okay, for those of you who don't, it is the island state of Australia, 150 miles south of the mainland. It's closer to Antarctica. And it is called the land down under, the land down under. Okay? It's one of the most remote places in the world. To make a long story short, a commodity wool market, they grow the finest merino wool in the world. They were getting killed by the commodity wool markets. All ranches were going bankrupt. We, in 1998 to 2000, helped them figure out how to take that wool that was the finest quality in the world, convert it into end-user product by connecting farmers on farming communities on a network across this island that connected 65 knitters and 15 linkers that link the arms and those of you who knit, okay, and connect that to the internet. Now, the internet only opened in 1996, so this was pretty early on. And today you can buy through a website called Cassidy Knitwear in 16 different currencies the finest merino wool sweaters, hats, and scarves you will ever find in the world. And they never sell 1 pound of wool off the island now to a commodity market. It is all an end user product.
And did they already have the knitters there?
Oh yeah.
So they didn't have to,
I mean,
so that just gave more work.
it just gave them more work, but they weren't working in a commercial enterprise. They were basically hand making it. And so the idea is there isn't. This can be applied in farming, where you're taking organic crops and selling farm to table directly to inns and directly to restaurants, as opposed to selling your product to a wholesaler or distributor. Okay, so but you use networks to put these. You got to map those assets. You got to figure out what you have, link them together, and so that you get closer to sea. And the value of getting closer to sea is, if you are making more, if you're getting 2/3 of the profit in the value chain and bringing that into the community, you can pay higher wages. And those wages stay in your community, and that rolls. And so those of you who own businesses, retail businesses, what happens to your businesses when more money's in the community? Okay, more money comes into your shop. So so in the vital economy model in a SeVEDS, your job is to figure out how to get your business closer to sea, okay, and further away from P. And you can do it with inns, you can do it with snow resorts, you can do it with almost anything. Okay, the second piece of this is, we define an economy by a swimming pool, believe it or not. Okay, the swimming pool, the concrete swimming pool, is the size of your economy. The water in the pool is the capital. And there's only 3 ways that capital goes in or out of that pool. One is you buy and sell services within the pool. So education uses dollars that are generated by taxpayers, typically in the region, and uses those dollars to educate children who live in homes in the region. Okay, that's basically using the dollars in the pool. All the consumer services that are done in a region that is not selling to people that don't live in the region. So in an area like this is linked to tourism, you're actually bringing money in that isn't yours, so that's actually an export. If you're only spending money as a consumer in the economy, you basically are, it's like Labor Day when lots of people in the pool, the water's splashing out all around on the edges, the sun's beating down, the water's evaporating, and the level of the pool is going down. So less capital's in the pool. Got that? Okay. The second way is, if you happen to be a retailer and you don't make clothes here and you got to go buy the clothes from outside the region, you're taking money out of the pool to bring those clothes in the region, right? If you're an oil dealer, if you're selling gasoline, you got to buy them, so you're draining the pool. So the first 2 ways an economy works, you're lowering the capital in the pool, which means your economy can't grow. The only way you grow the economy in a region like this is to export a service, export a product, export knowledge to bring to other people. So tourism is actually an export economy. It brings dollars that other people earn in another area and bring those dollars to be spent in your region.
See, I look at it as importing the money into the economy.
But you're actually exporting a service to import the money.
Gotcha. Okay.
And what that term is called in economics is investment attraction. So what you're doing is you're selling to create more investment in your region. Okay, so you're creating a service, selling it out. And so the second thing you're supposed to do in the vital economy model is, besides getting closer to the sea, is you're supposed to export, you're supposed to bring more water into the pool. So the pool's overflowing, so you got to build a new pool and you got a bigger economy. So does that make sense? You know, get close to the sea and put more water in the swimming pool. Okay? Now, what I've just given you in those 2 slides is your bachelor's degree in economics. Okay? We're working on a project in the center of the country right now where the Economic Development Organization, we ended up literally blowing up because the organization kept telling everybody at the tune of $4 million a year, trust us, economic development is really very complex and you can't possibly understand it. Okay, it's just too hard. Okay? So what we're saying to you is, yes, economics is complex, but you can understand it if you spend the time thinking about, from a common sense perspective, what it means to grow your economy, or how your economy, and essentially, to grow an economy, you got to bring capital in the region. At the end of the day, that's the story, okay? And you either get close to the sea, or you pull more water into the swimming pool to get there. So, now, why do we do a SeVEDS? To put these kind of things in approach. Well, essentially, those of you who have had businesses, how many of you are in businesses, own businesses here? Good number of you. How many of you don't have a plan? Okay, there's one of you, okay? Most of us, whether it works or not, we're supposed to have a business plan, right? And because if we don't know where we're going, any road can take us. Okay, and that doesn't mean you can't be flexible and you can't be entrepreneurial. I actually had somebody in economic development about 6 months ago tell me that metrics get in the way of entrepreneurs. Plans get in the way. You can't be flexible as an entrepreneur. I said, well, I happen to have founded 3 nonprofits and 4 businesses, 2 of which have gone public. And I will tell you, the first one I didn't have a plan. All the rest of them I had a plan. Okay? And metrics are my friend because they tell me, where my priorities need to be. And they tell me, if I'm going down the road and things aren't working, I have something to tell me what isn't working against what I thought was supposed to work. Okay, so if an economy is made up of organizations, and I'm sure in the school, you got a plan. And every teacher has a curriculum plan for their students. Okay, so what we need, if that's the way all the elements of the economy work, why wouldn't you have a plan, a strategic plan for your economy? And in this case, we're building a strategic plan for the region. And the reason it's, and in New England, it is very difficult to deal with the concept of regional economy because you all are town-based. If total non-existent counties. At Vital Economy, one of our jobs is to preach the gospel, according to Frank, that says, get over it, okay? You are competing against the world. Even your in is competing against, people have choices to go anywhere. And if you can figure out how to, with a solid plan, and how to link your asset in this town to another asset in Brattleboro, to another asset in Londonderry, or Dover, or whatever, by linking those assets together and leveraging with one another, you obtain more critical mass. You're able to benefit together to grow that pool much bigger. Does that make sense? So one of the challenges we have in New England, and we've been working here a long time, we've been working in Maine for the last 5 years, okay, just on this specific issue. If we can get our heads out of town competition and understand that to grow our businesses and our economy, we don't have to lose our town identity by working as a region. But we might lose our town economic viability if we don't work as a region. Okay? And so what we need to do is focus on how to get there. One of the ways we're going to get there within the SeVEDS strategy is to use something we call SMART goals. How many of you have ever heard of SMART goals? Man, this is a really good principle. I tell you, a principle that understands SMART goals, that's terrific. Okay, for those of you who don't know, this has been around for about 70 years. SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. So each of your goals is supposed to meet that standard, okay? And if the goal isn't specific enough, if it doesn't have a time horizon on it when it can be achieved, you're not going to get. And it's got to be relevant. It can't just be pie in the sky. It's got to be relevant to what you're trying to achieve. Okay, in terms of this SMART, what we now call SMART SEDS, and SEDS, C-E-D-S, this gets real confusing when you have SeVEDS and SEDS, okay? Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy is a term developed by the Economic Development Administration of the U.S. Department of Commerce. And the EDA requires regions that want to get at, that flood money you've gotten and infrastructure building. In order to get that, the EDA requires that you have a SeVEDS. What is more important now, because domestic spending dollars are becoming more scarce, all the federal agencies are now pooling their funds together in national, multi-agency competitive bids. So and by the way, a town can't go after those, only a region can. Another reason to organize as a region. So the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Department of Commerce and its multiple agencies, the National Institutes of Science and Technology, the Department of Labor, the Environmental Protection Agency, I could go on, Housing and Urban Development, are putting pools of money together and saying, here's a $40 million pool. We're going to make 10 awards across the country, $4 million each, compete nationally. Every single one of those agencies wants to see if there's a SeVEDS in place. If you don't have a SeVEDS and you apply for that grant, you lose points. Okay? So it's critical to have this SeVEDS, and it needs to be on a regional basis. So the process that we're working under is a best practices process. There's I only have one copy of this here, but we have electronic copies. If anybody's interested, I believe, Laura, you have an electronic copy of this. Okay, we can always, this is a best practice, this is called Performance Metrics Matter. Vital Economy was selected by the Economic Development Administration last year to write the best practice model for the country. For some unknown reason, they thought we did the best job at performance metrics in the country, asked us to write this up, how we do it, and they're circulating it nationally to every regional community. And it is the basis upon which this SeVEDS is being done. In addition, it has a regional focus. It's going to be asset-based. One of the ways that we work in economic development and vital economy is we help you identify what makes you unique. And it doesn't mean just because you have dirt and just because you're rural doesn't mean you're unique. It happens to be, is that dirt have certain qualities to it that can grow certain crops? Or is the weather or the microclimates you're in have certain conditions for tourism or recreation or growing assets? We actually had in California, in the Coachella Valley, which is where all the golf courses are, we actually used the clean air because of the desert there between Los Angeles and the mountains to use for Detroit companies to come and use that air to test clean fuel technologies in a bus system that was owned publicly across the range, because the air was so pure you could tell the difference. That's leveraging a unique asset. Okay, now how many of you would have ever thought of that one as a unique asset? Okay, okay. So what many of you may know something about this area, about its culture, about the skills that have been developed over the years. I learned something yesterday from Kelly and Kyle about what is unique about the snowmaking capability here that I didn't realize versus all the other ski resorts in the country. I had no idea that that was a unique capability that could be marketed. So we're looking at assets. We're also looking at helping you diversify your economy. Many communities, especially in areas where there's tourism related to a a ski resort, in many cases you may be a one-horse town. Okay? So one of the things we look at is how do we help you think about diversifying your economy? So you have multiple seasons of activity, you have multiple industries. You would never invest your 401k plan in one stock, right? At least most of us wouldn't. If everybody had invested their assets in Apple Computer about a year ago at $700 a share, they'd be in deep doo-doo today. Okay, so what we want to make sure is that your economy is a diverse portfolio. Just think of the economy as your 401k plan. Finally, one of the other things we want to look at is economic development if you get down to the basics, it's all about increasing prosperity. Would you agree? Does that make sense? Okay. There's only one way you increase prosperity. It's through increased productivity. And increased productivity only happens in three areas of innovation. You either innovate through a new approach to education that changes the equation. Actually, public high school was a new innovation in the early 1900s. The first public high school was built on land next to a factory that was being built in, I think it was Indiana. And all the kids being taught in the high school went right out the back door to work in the factory. Okay? Community college in the 40s was a major innovation in education that transformed how we met the growing skill needs of the nation. So you have, that's in technology and innovate. You also can innovate in technology. You all are up here in Vermont, in New England, where all the mills were. Okay, used water power. In those mills, they had in these long buildings, they had this big shaft that all the looms were connected to with belts. Okay, if one loom went down, what happened? Shut the whole factory down, right? The innovation there was this small electric motor that powered individual looms that then enabled you to pay people based on piecework. And so individuals were now incented to do a better job and didn't depend on one loom was not controlling the others. Okay, so are these examples helping you understand? So you're looking for how does technology innovate your business? And then third is there a new way of organizing yourself? Innovation organizations. I told people yesterday that bureaucracy was a new invention in the early 1900s. It's a pejorative word today. But it was a whole new way of management to organize the industrial economy. And so the problem is we're still, if you think about towns and you think about governments, they're organized based on a bureaucratic hierarchy, okay, in a flat world. Okay, and we actually believe that boundaries make a difference. And we've interviewed over 5,000 young people. You want to know why young people leave communities like this? We interviewed over 5,000 young people in this country in rural communities over the last 10 years to ask that specific question, to try to figure out what's going on. And they said, number one, when we're in school, we are connected to the world. When we walk out the door of our school, by the way, these are juniors and seniors in high school, and freshmen and sophomores in college. When we walk outside the door into the community, our parents and their friends act like boundaries make a difference. Think about that. Okay? The second thing they said, we love this environment, but nobody's enforcing the rules. You know, we love the canoe, we love the hike, we love the ski, but the adults aren't enforcing the rules.
What does that mean?
That means they're letting people, you know, in a lot of the communities we're in, they, you know, if you go in rural America, you have methamphetamine labs all over the place.
Oh, great.
Okay, all over. Methamphetamine labs are literally destroying rural America right now. They're destroying the fabric of every community across this country. Yet the adults who are in charge are not enforcing the rules. Okay. So they're also saying they let people pollute the lands or whatever that they're hiking or skiing in. So I mean there are what these kids are. There's a third one I won't go into, but basically what they're saying, these children are saying, is that the reality they see and the experiences they want to have don't connect to what the adults are doing. So they're basically saying the adults are screwing everything up. We said that as children also. But in this world, what's happening is when you've got this huge technological change that has occurred that has flattened the world, and if you want to understand why you feel put upon or a victim in terms of this economy, how many of you have ever read the book The World is Flat? Only a few of you. I would suggest you go read it. You can also read Hot, Flat, and Crowded, which is the next edition of that. The reason this book is important, it helps you understand how technology has transformed the way the world works. And the problem is the majority of American communities have not figured it out. The other reason this has happened is because we are the only country in the modern world that has no country economic strategy. In many cases, we don't even have a state economic strategy. So we think as a town or a county, we are so good that we're going to keep considering the local boundaries important, and we are going to compete against country strategies. Now, how many of you think that any of us that think that way need to be admitted to the Brattleboro retreat? Yet how many of us know that we act that way or other people act that way around us because it's what we know? Okay, so one of the jobs of the SeVEDS effort is to actually help educate the community as to it's not enough to create an economic strategy. We have to educate each other as to what we have the opportunity to take advantage of by leveraging the tools that are presented to us today and not ignoring them. Does that make sense? So this isn't just about putting numbers on it in a business plan. It's also putting a new perspective in the heads of our community and its leaders. And that's how we're going to build prosperity. And when you're building prosperity, you can either create wealth by adding new businesses, increasing exports, or you can retain wealth. If you're spending huge amounts of money on oil to heat your homes and heat your businesses, and you can work on renewable energies that use local biomass stocks and things to do that, you don't keep sending that money out of the pool, you retain it here, okay? So there are all kinds of ways to either retain wealth or create wealth. And if we do this together, you can't even see that, see I'll put this, okay, see there's a whole bunch of little separate pieces of the pie that aren't connected. If we can connect them all together, guess what happens? We get to have through collaboration, we get a bigger pie, okay, and it's a pie we can all share it. Okay, so, questions? Any thoughts, any perspectives you have based on what I've just outlined to you? And don't be shy. Don't feel like you can't challenge what we're trying to talk about here. Yes, ma'am.
When you put that last slide up about the bigger pie,
yes,
it spoke to me about the fiercely independent, self-reliant nature of, I grew up here, I was born in New Jersey, but I grew up here in the early 60s, and the people that I grew up with took care of themselves.
Right.
So can you talk a little bit about how you get over, you said earlier in the talk, how we get over ourselves?
Yes. We use, first of all, most people believe the way that this country grew was through this independent cowboy mentality. Any of you ever heard of a barn raising? Okay, you have them. How many of barn raisings are done by one person or one family? Okay, so what we try to do first of all is to help link back to iconic experiences that show how we really didn't do this all by ourselves. Okay, country schools. This country was built on the concept of country schools. Okay, and the Land Grant Act of 1787 actually set aside, when they laid out all that land out there in the Midwest and the West, they set up a piece of land out of everybody's area strictly to produce income for that school. And the school was not just used to teach. It was where the Grange meetings happened, funerals happened, weddings happened, it was a community center. Okay, today we have separated schools into these things called education mausoleums that you'd think if you were an adult you couldn't go through it because your head gets chopped off through the door. Okay, and yet they may be vacant more hours of the day than they're occupied. That's not the way schools were developed in this community. nationwide for many, many decades. So that's the first thing we do. We try to help people understand that there are iconic experiences in our lives, or at least in our reading and our family's long-term experience, that say to us, well, wait a minute, this is a misnomer that it's all about just us. So we try to build this sense of interdependence. And then what we do is we actually use examples to show that interdependence is a strength, not a weakness. So that by working with others, you can actually get a bigger pie, and you can even work with people you may not like to start with. Okay, I can assure you in Tasmania, Australia, where 2/3 of the people live in villages of 500 people or less, in an island nation the size of Ireland, in a geography that is composed of the rugged cliffs of Maine, the rolling hills of Southern California, the Rocky Mountains, the Mojave Desert. This is all in one geography. Okay, tough to get across. By working together over 3 years, they reduced youth unemployment from 40% to 20% by linking the town. So does that make sense to you? Okay, it takes time, as Pat said earlier. We didn't get into this mindset overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight, but we can get out of it one step at a time, one project at a time, one strategy at a time, that proves by working together we gain and we don't lose. The other thing that happens is that people believe that economies are zero-sum games. If you've been in an economy like this region has been in, where it's been very stagnant, hasn't grown, and in fact has declined, you believe that if you share, you have to give up something, because there's only so much around. What we try to show by examples of other communities is how much bigger the pie can get by collaborating, even with the people you consider to be your Friday night football enemies. Okay, so that's the strategy. And I hope that helps. Who else has any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I have a question, and I agree with everything you say, especially making
this
a four-season community. Well, whatever. But I think the real underlying problem with the young people, too, is they come out of college. They cannot come back to this area and make the money they're going to make in larger cities. So we need some kind of large corporations and things like that that are going to draw these people back. And that, I think, is a really tough issue.
Well, here's what I would suggest to you, is that first of all, I don't believe you need a large corporation to do that. If you step back and take a look at where economic growth is in this country, it's through the vast majority of growth in this company is in young companies that start out with 5 and 10 people and grow to 25, 50, 75 people. The vast majority of job growth is in companies of 50 employees or less. That has not been true in this current Great Recession that we've been in, because of the capital restrictions and because corporations had major blocks and are just building huge mountains of cash. They didn't have to rely on banks, but small business did. And the banks still today are not lending easily, even though they say they are. So what you can do is focus on building an innovation economy around gazelle-like small companies that will attract young people. Okay, you can do that, and you don't. And by the way, a region like this does not have the infrastructure to support a big business. Okay, it's all not. I mean, and ribbon cuttings are great. Politicians, elected officials, love ribbon cutting for a 200-person plant. Okay, but the media will pay attention to that. How many of you are here from the media? How many of you will show up at a ribbon cutting for 10 5-person businesses? One of you. Okay? Good. But see, if you look across this country, we pay attention to big, we don't pay attention to small, but small is what really makes the world go round. So, and quite frankly, if I think of my economy as an investment portfolio, would I rather attract a 250-person business or 10 25-person businesses? Because if one of those businesses gets a cold, I don't get pneumonia. But if the 250-person business gets a cold, I'm in big trouble as a town, right? Yes.
One of the things I've learned coming to these meetings and the things we had done at Vermont Tech,
in Brattleboro is how diverse the region is. So here in town, here we think of ourselves as just this little ski thing.
Right.
Or what feeds into or out of the ski thing. But there's large companies in Brattleboro, there's small companies in Bellows Falls, there's tech places, there's educational units all over the county that we aren't thinking about in this need to bring young people back here.
Yeah, and that's and if you all didn't hear what you say, you know, there's a lot of diversity, and a lot more diversity than people think. The problem is most people do not know, in this region, do not know how this economy functions. Okay, and if you don't know how it functions, you don't know what to take advantage of. Okay, and I will tell you, and that isn't just true here. We're finding all across this country, from an education standpoint, that young people in schools do not know what jobs are really about today. Guidance counselors don't know what jobs are about today, and parents don't know. In fact, in interviewing those 5,000 young people across the country, we asked them how many of them wanted to grow up and raise a family in the community. 90%. When we asked them how many believed that they could do it and have a job that was worthwhile to do it, 90% said they couldn't. And when we asked where did they learn that there weren't high value and interesting jobs here, guess who the #1 culprit was? Parents. #2, guidance counselors. So in a region we're working in right now, we're working on a project to hire guidance counselors in the summer to work in industry, different aspects of industry every summer, so they actually have an ability to learn and understand what is really going on in the real economy that their schools are sitting in. Okay, so and I often use the example of my father. When I was 7 years old, my father ran a major construction company and development company that his father had founded in 1908. And he used to take me from the time I was 7 years old on weekends to go to job sites. So he was showing me tactily, and I was experiencing with vision, with feel, what he did. And he would explain to me what the carpenters and the masons and the plumbers and the HVAC people did. So I began to understand that, and I began to relate to what I was learning in school to what could be done in that field. In the last 20 years, my father has been very he's now deceased 3 years ago. He would be 98 today, but he was, from the time he was 75 to 95, he didn't have a clue what I did. He said, you know, I'm going around the country, I'm talking to people, I'm doing, he says, how in the name of heavens can you make money doing that? You know, people actually pay, they listen to you, okay? You can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't feel it. Imagine in this software world, in the major apps world, how does the average person experience the economy? It's no longer as tactile, and it's no longer as local. My company is a virtual company. We have no employees. We have experts all over North America that work with us on projects. And some of them, like one of them today and yesterday that was supposed to be yours from Spokane, Washington, but thanks to the FAA and sequester and snow and broken planes, he hasn't made it yet. Okay, but we're linked by networks. Okay, we use all kinds of software technology to link ourselves together, link ourselves to our customers. So it's a whole nother world that we're operating in, and we have to help communities get there. Yes.
So I find your analogy of capital and the water in the pool to be great. And you know, there are people sitting in this room today who are sending water out of the pool. And so how do we convince people to keep the water in the pool? That, you know, what the true economic benefits are if you do that?
Well, one of the ways you do that is, first of all, the people have to understand there is a pool. Okay, #1. #2, you begin to map how spending is taking place. and you look, for instance, right now what we're doing in northern Maine. We have a major renewable energy project going in northern Maine, and where Aroostook County is, okay? They're spending 90% of all their energy as oil, because they can't get gas lines through there, although they're talking about doing it now. Trying to figure out how to get through to Granite. And all that money's going out of the state. So what we did is we made a major, put a major team together to look at renewables. And starting 2 years ago, have started a major biomass project. And have had to get the oil companies to cooperate with it. Had to get the foresters who love to just sell their wood, you know, the logs to whoever. We need to get some 45 million board feet that was local harvest. We had to prove to the federal government that we weren't creating carbon footprints because the supply was right next to where the plants were. I mean, you know, you got to go through all the pieces of the puzzle and help people understand what their opportunity is. And so the commodity wool market example I gave you, where, you know, all the stuff was going out of the state of Tasmania. What you do is you literally take one by one farming. You identify what your assets are, you identify what's growing, you look at the restaurants that are here, and instead of them spending money to go to a wholesaler that is buying stuff that's been produced in Guatemala or whatever, okay, you help them understand that all these assets are here. And you put a system together to make it easy for them to get access to it and create an affordable base, and they cut out all the distribution costs. So does that help you? I mean, it is, you first have got to figure out what it is that's going on in your economy. And secondly, then start to map the assets, and then figure out what the system patterns that need to change to link those assets together and have that purchasing and retained here in the community. Okay? It's complex, but it's not impossible. Okay, it just requires hard work. Any other? Okay, yes, ma'am.
So just hearing about, you know, what are the problems with a young professional? I'm a planner, and so every day I look at these statistics, and I also live them. My boyfriend and I, or my fiance and I, chose to live here after college because we like the lifestyle, and we like, am I speaking loud enough? Sometimes
just speak a little bit louder.
Sorry. We like the lifestyle, and we looked at Brattleboro, and we're like, you know.
Are you from Vermont?
No, I'm from Virginia. I moved here after college.
What part of Virginia?
Well, I came from Virginia from grad school. I'm actually from Ohio.
Okay.
But we liked the lifestyle. This was where we wanted to settle. We may be a minority because we are young professionals. And we enjoy everything about it. My fiance has to commute to Boston for a job because I was able to work here, but he can't. And we've been doing this for a year and a half now. And one of the things that I see an opportunity for in this region is less than half of my friends go to work. Most of them work, you know, telecommute. My boyfriend works part-time from Keene and then works the rest of the time in Boston. It's how things are going now. And so if you can tap into that, build your broadband infrastructure, you can allow people to have a lifestyle and quality of life that's out here, but allow them to tap into some of the economies that maybe aren't here, even though their skill sets are. So.
Wonderful example. That is, and a personal experience. And there's lots of young people like yourself that have those personal experiences here. And this is a huge opportunity. And what I'm going to do now, unless there's a really crying question, trying to keep this on time. Okay, let me move to the next session because we'll get into some of these statistics.